This is the 17th season of Bass Talk Live with your hosts, Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrat. BTL is brought to you by Lawrence, Bass Cat Boats, AFCO, Duck and Fishing, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Yamagatsu, The Bass Tank, and Denali Rods. BTL coming at you. Good Tuesday, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where Gene and I are going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Matthew, he is on Table Rock Lake, Gene.
Yeah, he called me yesterday and said, oops, I got to be on Table Rock. What are you doing tomorrow morning?
Yeah, he's got a lot going on right now, but he is actually fishing a media kind of an appreciation deal that takes place every year. This year it happened to be at Table Rock, so it is a team competition. I don't even know who his partner is, but he will be at Table Rock Lake, and we're actually going to try and maybe get him on tomorrow. Some of the areas around Table Rock, the cell service is horrible, even though Branson's right there, and you know Johnny owns the entire lake, but I guess he doesn't have cell towers in specific areas to get the signal out to all the necessary people on the lake. But anyway, a bit of news real quick. We talked a little bit yesterday about Brian Snowden because Brian Snowden is not on the list for the Elite Series next year. And I've known Brian for a zillion years, and I reached out to Brian to find out, hey, man, what's going on? And I talked to him for about 30 minutes yesterday, and he's actually going to come on the show. It's going to be a phone interview because, imagine this, his internet service is not that great around Table Rock. So he is going to join me, and then hopefully we find out what is in store for Brian Snowden in the next chapter of his life, because this is going to be the first year that he is not fishing a top-level tour in 20-plus years.
Wow.
Long time.
Yeah.
And I did ask him this, and we'll get into this tomorrow, if he was going to continue to tournament fish. And he said yes, but more in a Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas kind of region. Kind of like the old days when all of us used to fish the Central Pro-Ams with Ernie Dougherty. And I mean, that has been talked about and discussed on this show numerous times about how many people came out of that Central Pro-Am to go to bigger and better things from a professional fishing standpoint. But seemed very content, very happy, and I don't know what it is, and I'm going through it and been going through it. When these gray hairs start to appear, sometimes you start thinking about a few other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that true, Gene? Is that a correct statement?
Yeah. What are you asking me? What? Yeah. And I got 5 years on you, so yeah. It definitely you get retrospective. You know, like people that saw the show yesterday.
Yeah.
You think about where you've been, but then you start thinking, okay, what's the next chapter? And how long is the next chapter? And what do we got to do to try to, do as much good and have as much fun as we can in whatever time's left.
Yeah.
It certainly you do start to think about it.
Yeah. So it's going to be a great show tomorrow with Brian on, and really get his take on a lot of stuff from an industry that he has been entrenched in for probably well over 30 years.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah, and I like Brian a lot. And he did say he's going to continue his guide service. So he's going to continue guiding on Table Rock Lake. And he's got some other things in the work. Going to be doing some stuff for Bass Pro Shops. And we will dive into that tomorrow. All right, now, folks, right here. obviously, Gene listened to the show last night or yesterday or whatever you did. And, I went into my whole, leaving of the company when I was with UPS. And donuts played a part in that. So this morning, my good friend Gene brings me in. How many's in here?
There's a dozen.
I'm just glad there were no notes attached to it. That is awesome. That is incredible. You are sporting a vintage Bass Zone T-shirt. Look at that. Now that was where it's all about being there, right?
This is the All About Being There T-shirt.
All right.
So.
Long sleeve. Look at that. I don't even have one of those. I may have one of those up in the attic somewhere, maybe. That's awesome. And then the other thing that he brought was one of the very first decals. I don't know if you can see that. BassZone.com decals. And this was the first tagline that we created called the net effect on bass fishing. Right there. So, man, you dug up some good stuff there, Gene.
Yeah. I probably, if I keep digging, I probably got some other stuff somewhere. You were talking yesterday about the hat that had the net effect on the back.
Yeah.
I got one of those somewhere in the closet somewhere. And then the Z-Team T-shirts and some of those sort of things.
Do you still have the black and yellow purple jersey?
Yeah, still got that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, one of those things. It's like, this is certainly not my favorite colors, but but what do you do with it? It's like, okay, I can't just donate this to Goodwill. It's just, that just doesn't seem right.
No.
No. And so it stays in a box. It's with some other memorabilia from way back over the past 30 years of the fishing business.
Yeah. That is one of the memories I'm sure will be discussed on the December 20th show. I was so into that and bringing everybody together down at Lake Fork and doing that photo video shoot with some people that were very, very special to me from a friendship standpoint, and a lot of sticks too, man. I had a team rocking back then, man.
Yeah.
Ty Smith, Ed Barton, Sean Goodwin, Ron Shaw. It was loaded.
Yep. And then you had some goofballs like me and Glenn Cunningham and some of the guys that were just
Robert DeGraff and Reed
hanging out. Yeah.
Robert definitely not just hanging out. Glenn wasn't either.
No, they were good.
I remember when Glenn qualified for the Federation National Championship on Keystone, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
And they had the weigh-in at the aquarium in Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Glenn being Glenn. Just didn't catch him, man. Just didn't catch him. But, man, one of my true friends in building this thing up and being a huge supporter of everything that I tried to do. But I'm glad you're in studio. We got a lot to talk about. I know some great conversation was what went down here recently at the U.S. Open and the amount of money that was donated to conservation. Right. So we'll get into that. And then for those people out there on the instant feedback, if you have any conservation questions, hey, now's the time. Now is the time to ask the man that knows more about conservation and bass fish care than anybody on this planet. So here's your chance to throw down some questions to my good friend Gene, and we can dive into that. But let's kind of talk about this donation or money that was raised by Johnny and Bass Pro Shops, because honestly, Gene, I don't know a whole lot about it. I do know that it was a fairly large amount of money that was put together, and what the end result is, I don't know. I don't know how much money it was. I don't know how it's going to be utilized, and I thought it would be really cool to hear from the guy that knows about it, how this money is going to be utilized, how much it was, and how the whole thing came about. So what can you tell us about it?
Well, let's kind of roll the clock back. Back in the mid-2000s, there was a group of fisheries people that were getting together and realizing that the habitat for fish across the country was starting to decline. You think about a lot of our lakes and reservoirs that are 40, 50, 60 years old. We had streams and rivers that were degraded from erosion and pollution and all that kind of stuff. And they kind of got together and started talking about, well, what can we do on a big scale, a national scale, to help improve fish habitat? And ultimately, that leads to more fish, which means more fish for fishermen to catch. And that kind of spurred a little idea with Johnny Morris at Bass Pro Shops to put some of his money into a project at Table Rock Lake to the tune of about $1 million. This is like in 2007. So Johnny got with the Corps of Engineers and the Missouri Department of Conservation, and they put together $1 million project on Table Rock and put in, 1,000 some odd habitat structures,
Wow.
brush piles, stumps, rock piles, all sorts of stuff. They worked up in the watershed. They paid money to clean out their septic tanks, just doing everything to try to improve not just the habitat, but the water quality too. And that kind of formed this idea a little closer of this organization that eventually became called the National Fish Habitat Partnership, which is, I'm on the board of directors of that group now. I was appointed last year. It is kind of an umbrella organization that oversees the work of about 20 smaller groups around the country that do habitat work on specific regions or specific species of fish.
Okay.
And there's federal funds that come from Washington. It's $6 or $7 million a year that comes down, and it's split up equally among these 20 different groups. When you split that up, it really doesn't amount to just a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things. But they do projects on rivers, streams, lakes, reservoirs, trying to improve fish habitat. So when they came up, Johnny and his team came up with this idea for the U.S. Open Amateur Team Championship. They decided that they were going to make a donation to this National Fish Habitat Partnership.
Okay.
And that's what they wound up doing. They basically, between Bass Pro, Johnny Morris, and Toyota, they collected all the entry fees from all of the tournaments, the qualifying tournaments that they'd had all year long.
Yep.
And they put all that money in a pot, and somehow they rounded it up to it's a very strange number, but it was, in big terms, it was $1.58 million.
Okay.
That they donated to this National Fish Habitat Partnership. Largest conservation donation that anybody'd ever heard of in recent history. And, and a lot of people think, well, this is all a kind of a publicity thing, but really it's not. The folks that put on that tournament, Johnny Morris and his team and Toyota that sponsored a lot of that, conservation is really something that's near and dear to his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And he spends a tremendous amount of his own money on conservation efforts, donating to various organizations and that do projects that benefit fishing. And it's certainly that's kind of self-serving, and that's his business. You make fishing better, you're going to sell more fishing tackle and boats. And I understand that. But his real goal is to make fishing better, because fishing is, it's kind of that wholesome sport that everybody can get involved with. It makes people happy. It's fun. And that's really a big part of his goal. So they donated this $1.58 million to our Habitat Partnership. And over the next few weeks, our organization is going to be trying to figure out how do we spread that money around through these other smaller partnerships that we work with to meet Johnny's expectations. Obviously somebody gives you $1.5 million, they expect certain things out of it, and we're going to try to focus in on doing things. We think we're probably going to deal more with lakes and reservoirs and things that directly affect sport fishing.
Okay.
To make fishing better. And and it's all about habitat. It's with fish, it's no different than with deer or turkeys or any other kind of critters that the fans are familiar with. Habitat is the key. You can't just go out and stock more bass. That doesn't work. If you don't have the habitat, you got to have that first before anything else works. So that's a big challenge, is to figure out now we've got this big chunk of money. What are the criteria going to be for the organizations that want to apply for that money? And we'll give it out in the form of grants. And we haven't decided yet if it's going to be a whole bunch of little grants, or it may be a very few really big ones where there's some of these organizations may want to try to do some really grand habitat, like the Table Rock plant, where they spent $1 million over several years.
Yeah,
it may wind up being that we focus more that way. But I'm pretty sure that, from a bass fishing perspective, a good bit of this money is going to wind up going to projects that I think will directly affect the quality of bass fishing in a number of places around the country.
What would some of those projects be, Gene?
A lot of it will be habitat installation, brush piles, artificial structures. The typical thing that a lot of people think about when they talk about doing a conservation project, sinking brush piles or some kind of structure that attracts bass. Some of it may be related to planting aquatic plants in places that need some help with that kind of habitat. It may be working on shoreline erosion, planting stuff along the shorelines to help with erosion problems that cause muddy water, helping keep the water cleaner. So those are the kinds of things that we're probably looking at. I think with this kind of funding, the groups that are out there that are going to be applying for these grants, they can get pretty creative. When you got $20,000 or $30,000 to work with, that's one thing. But if somebody says, "Hey, you've got $200,000 to work with," you can really start to think outside the box and figure out, wow, we can really make a difference here in terms of this lake or this river, and improving the habitat. And there's a bunch of us that are kind of hoping that Johnny felt that this donation, the results of the tournament were so great that they want to do it again. Next
More
year,
money.
and the year after, and the year after. And so we're keeping our fingers crossed that they want to try to continue doing this, because it's certainly the biggest donation that our organization has ever received. And a lot of the groups around the country, when they get a grant like this, that spurs other donations locally. Mm-hmm. So, you give somebody $100,000, they may raise another $100,000 locally, and now they've got a $200,000 project. So, we certainly encourage a lot of that. So that, and I'm kind of hopeful that from an industry standpoint, that other people in the fishing and boating industry will look at this and say, we want to be part of that too. And other companies will, that have a really strong conservation ethic, if you want to call it that, will decide we need to partner with this. We need to be part of this. And man, then things, sky's the limit. We can really start doing some really great stuff.
When will the grant process begin? In other words, for people out there, organizations that are interested in applying for this grant money, when is that going to start?
We don't know yet. That's okay. In fact, I've got a call this week with our other board members to talk about some of the planning process. All we have right now is the big Happy Gilmore check. We don't have.
It looks good.
Yeah, it looks good. That they presented on the stage at Table Rock 2 weeks ago. But I don't know exactly. We haven't come to terms yet exactly how we're going to orchestrate this process. I suspect it will be in the springtime in 2022, next year, when we'll start working with the individual partnerships. The one that I'm familiar with, that I've worked with for years now, is called the Reservoir Habitat Partnership and Friends of Reservoirs. And our mission really fits really well with what we think Johnny and his crew want this money to go to, because everything we do is lakes, reservoirs, and sport fish, and I think through that organization, so the local bass club is probably not going to be able to just apply for a grant. They're going to have to go to one of these individual partnerships like the Reservoir Fish Habitat Partnership. That's friendsofreservoirs.com. Shameless plug.
Okay.
And become a chapter. And it's kind of like an Adopt a Lake project. You got a bass club and a lake association, the marina association. Everybody gets together. We're going to make things better on our lake. And they become a chapter, part of our Friends of Reservoirs organization. That makes them eligible then to apply for these grants when they come around.
Okay.
So right now it's kind of a wait and see thing. We're going to have to see this spring. Probably the whole process will be laid out, and we'll be in consultation with Bass Pro Shop and Johnny and his team to make sure that we're kind of following what they were seeing, their vision for where this money was going to go.
Mm-hmm. Do you, I estimate, I guess is the right word, or foresee this happening in 2022?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that by 22 we'll have some sort of criteria set up.
Okay.
And things now, the nature of working with natural systems, and this is something we've dealt with fish habitat projects for years, is you give somebody a grant to do something on their lake, and there's a drought or a flood, and it postpones things, or COVID comes along and they can't get people together to do the work. Because a lot of the projects require a lot of bodies, just people.
Yeah.
So, the timing is one of those things that we really don't know how it's all going to work out. But my hope is that we get things up and rolling by this spring and start getting this money out there to start some projects. Now, some of those projects may take a year or 2 or 3 to complete. It just depends on the scope of the project and how things go.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of potential here that we've never had before, just because of the timing and the amount of money that's been donated.
A lot of money. 1.5 million over.
And John, Johnny's any number of times over the course of 2 weekends ago at the U.S. Open at Table Rock, almost any time anything was said about the tournament itself, they always included that, benefiting conservation, because that was a real focus. Obviously, it was about, the $1 million payday that the Auburn team won, the boats they gave away, all of the swag that everybody got, and the great time. It was a wonderful. The whole event was just first class, but the benefiting conservation theme really rose to the top throughout the whole weekend.
Cool. All right, let's do this. We're going to take a break. Some people are asking questions. I have some questions.
Okay.
All right, so we'll take a short break and then come back and pick Gene's brain on some, you know me. I've got dumb questions, but I need answers, Gene.
We got them.
All right, everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back here on a Tuesday.
Elite FS puts the full range of Lowrance fish finding tools at your fingertips. Find fish with active imaging 3-in-1 with Fish Reveal. Target fish with active target live sonar and watch fish react to your lure as it happens. Built-in C-Map Contour Plus charts make it easy to find key fishing areas. But best-in-class charts and powerful sonar is only the beginning. It's easy to build your fully networked FS system. From sonar and waypoint sharing to controlling the Ghost trolling motor and power poles. Lowrance Elite FS. Targeting fish just got easier.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, This new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
So, you're looking to buy fishing electronics, huh? Are you also looking for true experts to help guide you through it? Well, at the Bass Tank, you've come to the right place. We are live forward-facing sonar pioneers with thousands of hours spent learning through winning trophies, cashing checks, and just having fun. Whatever brand you need, we have it. We offer free shipping, and we have 2 financing options available. Our experts are here to help you. Call us today or visit thebasstank.com.
Preparation is key to success. And that preparation starts well before you ever hit the water. You're only as strong as your connection to the fish, and your line is that critical connection. Confidence in your line every minute of every day on the water is a necessity, and failure, it's not an option. Sunline makes the fluorocarbon, nylon, and braided lines to give you the strength to guarantee your confidence.
There's one.
You know what works. Now you need a bunch of them so you don't run out on your next fishing trip. The Big Bite Pro Packs feature 25 baits per pack at a price far below that of having to buy 5 packs of regular baits. Now the Pro Pack has a big brother, the Mega Pack. The Mega Pack features 100 of your favorite baits.
With these, one bag is usually plenty to get through the day. It helps me stay organized, helps me save money, helps me catch more fish.
Combining one of the most popular hook styles with Gamakatsu's beefier Superline offering, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend delivers the strength necessary to target big fish in heavy cover. Well suited for braided line and heavier fluorocarbon, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend is built using stronger Superline wire that allows anglers to easily fish a finesse worm around heavy cover. The round bend offers a larger bite area, perfect for any worm presentation, while increasing your hookup ratios. The newly enhanced Z-bend holds your plastics on the hook longer, reducing the number of pull-offs and reducing damage to plastics. Available in 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0, this is the most durable worm hook, designed for heavier lines that hold your bait on longer.
I've made my living on the water for over 20 years.
For 14 years.
For over 23 years. I've worn a bunch of different clothing brands over the years.
Some companies big.
And some companies small. All of them said they were making clothing for us. But none of them knew us.
None of them were us.
Except for one.
Except for one.
Except one. AFCO. AFCO.
AFCO. AFCO.
Fishing isn't part of us. It is us.
Everyone, Brandon Polnick here. People always be asking me what I got tied on. I'm like, X-Zone lures. And they're like, Brandon, why you got X-Zone lures tied on? And I'm like, let me show you why.
The bite.
Get out of there. Get out of there. Oh, yeah. Oh, freaking chicken. Get in here. Oh, God. Giant. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
I think you get the point.
All right, we are back on a Tuesday. Matt, he is at Table Rock Lake, and sitting in for Matt is my good friend Gene Gilliland. And Gene, we're going to try and take some questions now. And one of the questions that was on the comments on the YouTube feed I was actually one of my questions. And it wasn't exactly the same question, but it was in the ballpark. And it has to do with, I guess the right term is managing the forage, be it shad, crawfish, whatever it is for whatever body of water. How big a part, and is that really an element in conservation that you guys have to manage?
It is in some respects, in a small body of water, a farm pond, a small lake, it's certainly possible to do some things in terms of enhancing the forage base. You got to remember, though, that if you go out and let's say you want to try to stock shad in a big lake, a reservoir, they got to have something to eat.
Plankton,
right? And so it's that whole food chain thing that
cycle
people don't always think about. That you know, if you go out and you throw in a bunch of shad, if enough of them survive, they spawn their little brains out, and now you got millions of shad, and they do okay as long as you have enough food to maintain them. But in general, for most places, the forage base kind of takes care of itself. And there's some places where some states will stock threadfin shad, especially as you get kind of in I'd say the mid line of the country, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kentucky, over that way. We have really cold winters, and it'll kill them because threadfin shad can't survive when the water temperatures get down below about 40 degrees. And so they may have to come back and restock those lakes after really severe winters to kind of get them started again. And then you just hope things cycle along and everything works until you have another really bad winter, and then it kind of starts all over again. But for the most part, there's not a lot that's done in terms of, introducing forage fish, and that's one of the problems that has occurred across the country is that people decide, oh, we're going to do this on our own, and they start moving critters around from one place to the next, thinking this is going to help my lake, when in fact they don't really know all of the consequences. And in some places it may help fishing for a while, but then long term it causes other things to crash. So we don't want people playing bucket biologist in that respect. But for the most part, if you've got good habitat, again, if you've got good shoreline cover, if you've got vegetation, if you've got good, brush, if your water levels are good, the bluegill and the sunfish will take care of themselves. Shad are pretty self-sufficient as long as you've got plenty of plankton out there. The shad are happy, and so. Crayfish are another one of those things that just kind of happens. In a small body of water, you can go out and dump in bags and bags and bags of crayfish, and it's just like throwing a bunch of Skittles out there to a bunch of high school kids. They disappear. They get, it's like candy. They get eaten so quickly that it's kind of fun, but in the long term, it's probably not helping that much. And certainly in a big reservoir, there's no way you could add enough to really make a difference.
Right.
So the goal is managing the predators, not so much the prey. And that's where, dealing with the kind of predator fish you have in the lake, whether it's bass or striped bass hybrids or walleye or whatever, managing the predators is kind of that top-down approach. You're looking at working from the top of the food chain and making sure that everything works well underneath it.
All right, let's go to the comments here. I'm going to flash this one up. Gene, does pouring soda in a deep-hooked fish really work?
Yes and no. There was a study done by some Canadian researchers last year or year before last where they used northern pike as their test fish, and they looked at a bunch of different. They used Mountain Dew and Coke and I don't remember what else, and ultimately what they decided was that putting fish back in the water is just as effective at stopping bleeding as pouring the soda down the fish's throat. We know that the citric acid and the carbonation in these soda drinks help restrict blood vessels, and it can help stop bleeding. What we don't know is what happens long term. Does that, especially the acids and stuff in those drinks, might be damaging the gill filaments on the fish, and obviously that's not good because then the fish can suffocate.
Right.
A lot of people, this happens a lot with anglers that they try things like that and their fish survive, and they go to weigh in if they're in a tournament, and hey, the fish is alive. What they don't know is what happens to that fish 2 or 3 days later. And that's where it really gets dicey. And so for the most part, a lot of those kind of things, we've tried to avoid recommending those tricks because there's just too many unknowns about what might happen to those fish after the fact. And this study sort of kind of came in that same ballpark, is that, yeah, you're better off just putting them back in the water, and the fish's natural systems will coagulate the bleeding and stop bleeding, and the fish will be better off.
Let me ask you this. Has there ever been a study, and there might be, I'm just unaware, where it's been catch, weigh, and track? In other words, some type of tracking chip or something like that has been placed on a fish that's actually been caught in a tournament, weighed in during weigh-in, and released to identify what happens to this fish after he's caught, weighed, and released.
Yeah, several studies. There's two kinds of tracking methods. There are, you can put little tags or marks of some sort on the fish that identify that fish, but it's not a radio track. It's something that later, if that fish is caught, it's like a tag. You know, you've seen these tags on the back of fish. It's got a number on it, tells you, and you can find out where that fish was caught and how big it was and that sort of thing. The other option is to put in actual radio transmitters.
That's more of what I was asking.
Where they can actually track individual fish and figure out where they go and what they do. The problem with those studies is that they're very expensive. Those little transmitters cost thousands of dollars.
Okay.
And so, for the most part, it limits the number of fish that you can do that with. So then there's always the question, okay, we only tagged 10 or 15 or 20 fish. Is that really enough to tell us what all of those fish, those hundreds of fish that get released after a tournament, are doing? But in general, what all these tracking and tagging studies have shown is that when fish are released from a tournament, most of them, not all, but most of them will stay in the immediate vicinity, say within half a mile of the release area for several days, sometimes weeks. A few of them will stay there for months. Some of them will stay there the rest of their lives. But gradually, the fish disperse and they spread out. Now, that doesn't always mean that they go home, because in some cases, these fish may have been moved
miles,
30 miles.
Yeah.
You know, or 100 miles if you've got a big, long river system. And those fish may not have the slightest idea how to get home. So they'll wind up going to some place where the habitat's right, the food is right, the temperature, the oxygen, all of those things they need, and set up a new territory if they've been displaced that much. But the whole idea of these fish stockpiling in the release areas is fairly short term. Most all of the studies have shown that eventually those fish will move out, and that does make a difference. Different times of the year, when the water's really cold, they're not as likely to move out as quickly. In warmer months or in the springtime, when they've kind of got those spawning urges, they will disperse from release areas much more quickly.
Okay. All right. Here's another question from JD. Gene, we have a small 30-acre state park lake that had awesome bass fishing. Sauger were accidentally stocked about 5 years ago, and trout stocking began 4 years ago. Is there any way to get it back?
The sauger, I guess, obviously they're going to be a competitor with the bass. It just depends on how many of them were in there, and whether it's doubtful that there's any kind of natural reproduction going on in sauger in a lake that size. The trout ultimately, depending on how big your bass are, could be forage. You think about the California lakes and how many giant bass they grow because they're feeding them trout. A lot of times, though, the interactions between other species are not really what's causing your bass population problems. There's usually something else going on with the habitat. Maybe it's water level fluctuation, maybe it's just aging of the pond, and the habitat is declining, which reduces the numbers of young bass being produced every year that can grow up to make for quality fishing. So that's the kind of thing you've got to look at, is what's going on. You kind of got to look at the bigger picture. It may not be that you can point to the sauger or the trout stockings as being something that's really detrimental to the bass population, because it doesn't take a lot of adult bass to spawn and produce what you need in a pond or lake. But if they don't have the habitat for the little guys when they're growing up that first year, that's when it's real critical. And so I think that's a lot of what they've got to look at is really more get into that habitat stuff. Like we said earlier, that's habitat's where it's at. That's the key to the whole thing.
All right, another comment. Can Gene give us some examples of good/bad fishing habitats to add in the lake? What's good, what's not good?
Okay. First, you got to make sure you have permission. There are a number of places around the country where it's illegal for people to go out and dump things in the lake. So you need to get permission from whoever owns the body of water. It might be the Corps of Engineers, might be a river authority, might be a city. Just that's the first step, is to make sure that you've got permission. Artificial habitats have really caught on lately because they're very easy to assemble. It's easy to transport on boats. You can buy the materials at any home improvement store. And then there's other ones that you can buy ready-made kits. There's companies that make these things, Mossback and Fish Hiding and Pond King, just three of the companies that come to mind that make artificial structures that you can put together and put out in your lake. And those can help. Keep in mind that most of these structures are fish attractors. They're not making more fish. Mm-hmm. They just attract the ones that are already there and give them a place to live. If you really want to try to produce more fish, then aquatic vegetation is really a key. And if you're in an area like here in Oklahoma where we have an abundance of cedar trees, if you put things that are in the water like cedar trees, that the branches are really tight and tiny and there's little bitty spaces, that can help provide hiding space for the little fish. Most of these artificial structures, the spaces between the limbs and branches are pretty big, and they're really more suited to adult fish. So it kind of depends on your goal. If you're really just trying to congregate the ones that are already there, if you know you've already got some good fish in the pond or lake, then a lot of these artificial structures, brush piles, the typical cedar tree or oak tree or whatever, sycamore, you name it. A lot of times there's nothing at all wrong with using those artificial or those natural structures like trees. Mm-hmm. You just got to remember that they're going to degrade with time. 5 to 7 years, cedar trees are pretty much gone. Now, oak trees, hardwoods, and things will last a lot longer. The other thing you've got to worry about is, does your lake go up and down a lot? If those lakes fluctuate very much and those structures get exposed to the sun and the elements, they will disintegrate very quickly. So you got to make sure, you got to look at what your situation is. If you've got a lake that's pretty stable, then you don't have to worry about that as much.
All right. A friend of mine told me this. I've never done it. He's never done it. He just came up with the idea to take a bowling ball, all right, and you drill holes in the bowling ball all around it, and then you take PVC pipe and put it in the holes in the bowling ball. Then you get, I don't know what it's called, like an O-ring screw, and you put it in the top to where you can put a rope through it, mm-hmm. and then you lower it down.
Right.
You get it secure, because it's 16 pounds.
Right.
Right. And then you take the rope up and you've got this bowling ball with these things sticking out. How do fish react to PVC pipe?
It's structure. I mean, there's lakes around. If you throw a toothpick out there, there's going to be a fish hanging under it the next day. Because they're looking for something to hang out by. PVC is fine. A lot of structures are made out of PVC now. That's pretty common. The thing you're talking about with the bowling ball is similar to a thing that somebody sells. I can't remember who it is. They call it the porcupine, and it basically is a structure that holds a whole bunch of PVC pipes sticking out in all different directions. One of the things that we've found over the years is that for bass, horizontal structure tends to be preferred over vertical. Crappie like vertical structures, especially things that come way up off the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Bass tend to like things that are more horizontal. You think about lay down logs on the shoreline.
Yeah.
So a lot of the artificial structures that are made kind of mimic a tree with a trunk and just limbs that go out horizontally. And that tends to be preferred by the bass a little more so than random things that go off all different directions.
That bowling ball that I use to get DQ'd might get a whole lot of holes in it.
And if the little branches are close enough together, those would make good habitat for little fish. Because the spaces between the pieces of pipe are too small for a big fish to get into, so it gives the little fish a place to hide until they get big enough to fend for themselves. Where most of these artificial structures that you can buy, the spaces between the branches or the tubes or whatever are pretty big, and so they're really made more for adult fish.
Okay. All right, next question here. Gene, what is the best way to control or eliminate duckweed without affecting other grass and lily pads in a small lake, say 10 to 15 acres?
Duckweed is a challenge. For those of you that don't know what duckweed is, it's a little bitty tiny floating plant, size of a pinhead, and it can double its coverage in a day. And so in ponds that have this stuff on it, it can get out of hand, and it can just completely blanket a pond and block out all the sunlight, and which that basically can kill the entire pond because no sunlight gets underneath. So it's very definitely something to try to work on. There are some chemicals. Unfortunately, that's about the only thing. And if you don't want it, grass carp will eat it, but it's not something they like. It's like, they're going to go after all the good stuff first. That's one of the downsides of grass carp is they don't always eat things you want them to eat. They'll eat the things they want to eat first.
I had no idea they were so picky.
Oh yeah, they really are. They really are, and that's one of the problems with using grass carp. The chemicals, the herbicides, can be very specific, but duckweed is a tough one. You just need to. I would suggest whatever state that person's in to contact their county extension people, and there's some good resources online. There's a really good website called Pond Boss that has a world of information about pond management. Bob Lusk, an old friend of mine, we went to college together at Texas A&M. He's the pond guru, and Pond Boss magazine and Pond Boss website has tremendous amount of information. You can look up duckweed control, and you'll get all the answers you need.
Interesting. Let me throw this one up here. I don't know if you know about this. What are Gene's thoughts on Bullard's Bar in California producing 6 world records over a short period? As I understand, there are no bait fish in the lake other than, what is that?
Kokanee.
Kokanee.
Yeah.
That are planted.
Yeah. There probably are some other bait fish out there, and there's probably crayfish and that sort of thing too. Those records have all been, well, I started to say spotted bass, but they're not actually spotted bass. They're Alabama bass. Several years ago, the ichthyologists decided that this, what we used to call the Alabama spotted bass or the Coosa spotted bass, is a separate species now, and that's the species of fish that went to California years ago and were stocked in a lot of those lakes out there. That's the ones on the Coosa River that get considerably bigger than most spotted bass in other places around the country.
Mm-hmm.
In California, there were no bass. Bass are not native to California at all, and so you go out there and you put these fish in a basically an environment where there's no predators. There's lots of food. If they're stocking kokanee, which are kind of a trout,
mm-hmm.
High protein diet, they grow like crazy and they get big. So it's kind of one of those. All the planets have aligned, and you wind up producing these record-sized fish. The problem that we're having now is that people see that sort of thing and think, I want those fish in my lake. And so they start transplanting them, kind of like I was talking about the forage fish, putting them in the wrong place. And a lot of places where the Alabama spotted bass have been moved to around the country, they've actually caused more harm than good. Lake Norman's an example in North Carolina where the largemouth bass population has almost crashed because the spotted bass, the Alabama bass, are taking over. And there are several places around the country where anglers have moved these fish because they wanted them in their lake, and they don't understand the potential consequences. And a lot of times bad things can happen. It may not happen right away, and fishing may be better for a while, but over time, bad things are starting to happen. So that's, we're really trying to encourage people not to move those fish. But that's what's going on out in California. Is, the same way with the giant largemouth that they used to catch out there, the 20-plus pound fish along those lakes in San Diego. And, you had a situation where you bring Florida bass to Southern California where there are no bass and there's no predators, and you feed them trout and they grow to enormous sizes. Same kind of deal.
I'm going to throw up a comment. Do you recall, or were you aware that John Story passed away recently?
No.
Yeah. And actually Rex Moncrief, who's on the comments, shot me an email. Rex, I knew Rex 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He used to be really involved with what John had going on, both at Champion and then when he started Hawk Boats.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people understand the importance of John's story to the bass boat business. But he recently passed away. Yeah. But Rex has a question. He wants to know, Gene, how far north has the giant Salvinia problem reached? Does Gene feel it's more detrimental to bass or to boats? What is that?
Giant Salvinia is a floating fern. It is considered the worst aquatic weed in the world.
Why is that?
Because it's really hard to kill. It grows exponentially. It floats and creates these dense mats that basically shade out everything else. It outcompetes everything else in the water. And just the way it's built, it's really hard to treat with chemicals, with herbicides. And if you get kind of floods and stuff and wave action, a little bit of a wash up on shore, and you'll have layers and layers of this stuff, and you kill the stuff on top, and the ones underneath survive, and then they get washed back into the lake, and bang, it goes again. Texas, Louisiana, there's some states now that are spending millions of dollars trying to control this stuff.
What's it look like?
It's about the size of a thumbnail.
Okay.
Just think of a fern with, kind of frilly little leaves, but it's about the size of a thumbnail, but it grows in clusters and creates really dense mats. And it'll grow on top of itself, so you can have mats that are a foot thick.
Oh, wow.
And so it completely shades out anything that's underneath. And that's one of the real problems. It is not very. His question about how far north is it's not. It's a tropical plant, so it doesn't grow very far north. It is. They found it in places like in Millwood in Arkansas. We haven't had any in here in Oklahoma, but it's kind of a line, I would say. I-40, across the country is probably going to be about as far north as it's going to grow. It probably won't survive the winters that far north. The challenge, though, is that this stuff can grow so explosively that if it does get introduced into a pond or lake, it can really cover a lot of water in a matter of weeks.
Salvinia,
giant salvinia.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things where, we've always pushed the clean, drain, and dry mantra. If you're on a lake that has this stuff in it, when you pull your boat out of the water, little pieces of this stuff, little fragments of it can hang onto your boat trailer and your boat, your power poles and whatever, off of your boat itself. And you don't know it, and then you go to some other lake and launch your boat, and this stuff falls off your trailer or your boat, and bang, you got an infestation. And,
interesting.
It's some bad stuff. And Caddo Lake, a lot of people have heard of that there on the Texas-Louisiana border.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands, acres and acres and acres of this stuff, just covering big chunks of that lake. Toledo Bend, they've had a real problem with it down there. It's not a good plant to deal with.
All right, here's an interesting question from JD again. Gene, looking to add a fish tank at the shop and having a pet bass. What are your thoughts? Good idea or bad idea?
It's not a bad idea at all. I mean, I know a lot of people that have had pet bass. Our friend Gary Judici.
Oh yeah,
they've had one in their tanks at their offices for years, and it became. I remember in the old days. This is when they had an office in downtown Norman that I can't remember the name of the fish, but they had it, and it had grown from a little guy up to pretty good size. And they fed it like once a week, and the day and the hour that they fed it was when all of the fishing buddies, everybody would show up at the store at their office for feeding the fish. The one thing you do have to be real cautious about is make sure you've got a cover on the tank, because almost everybody I know that's ever had a pet bass is that they found it on the floor the next morning. Because they'll try to jump out of the tank. So you got to make sure you got the thing covered.
Wow. What's the best size gallon-wise for a tank? Do you know? What's the minimum, would you think?
Well, the fish is going to grow to fill up whatever tank you've got. If you put them in a 10-gallon tank, they're never going to get more than a few inches long. Yeah. So bigger is better, whatever you've got room and size and the patience to deal with to maintain the water quality and all that kind of stuff. But, I've seen fish that are 2 or 3 pounds, 15, 16-inch fish in, 100-gallon tanks.
I had one at one time when we were down at, I called it Norble. It was Noble, but we had a Norman address, but it was 125 gallon.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
We called it Victor.
It's fun to watch, and you can really learn a lot from it too. If feeding habits and watch the way they react when the weather changes.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. It can be a very kind of an educational process and just be fun at the same time.
It was cool, and then it just got to a point where it was too big. Victor outgrew the tank in my opinion, so I actually got him and took him to Arbuckle and left him in Arbuckle.
There you go.
So it's interesting. It is. It's a cool process to watch them and just see their behavior, what they do. Pretty comfortable climate though. They never have to deal with the elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll grow pretty fast if you keep them fed, because they've got that stable temperature. Everything's nice. They don't have to go through winters and hot summers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Let's see here. There was a question about. Oh, here it is, right here.
I was just looking at that one.
Yeah. Ask about soft plastics left in the lakes. How long do they stay there? What happens to them?
This is a very controversial situation. Excuse me. Soft plastics don't biodegrade. Even some of the ones that claim to be biodegradable apparently don't degrade very quickly. Soft plastic lures are made out of PVC, and they will last almost indefinitely underwater.
Wow.
A lot of the ones, especially the ones that have salt in them, when they get in the water, they swell up. And there have been a number of studies where people got all hair on fire about catching fish that had plastic baits inside them. They'd ingested them because fish will pick those things up off the bottom thinking it's something that they're supposed to eat. You know, it's a bait that's been torn off a hook, or somebody carelessly throws it overboard, and the fish will eat it. In some cases, a very small number of cases, it will actually stop up the fish, clog them up.
Not good.
Because those things will swell up and they can't pass them.
Yeah.
The vast majority, though, the studies that have been done fairly recently have shown that they throw them up. They regurgitate them, or they pass them out the other end. But you know, in the grand scheme of things, it may harm a few fish, but it's not hurting the entire fish population. So what it really is a litter problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, if you're out in the parking lot and you have a candy bar, you don't just throw the wrapper on the ground, you throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
It needs to be the same way in your boat. The American Sport Fishing Association started a campaign a few years ago called Pitch It. And the idea was pitch it in the trash, not in the lake. So all of your soft plastics, collect them. There are people that you can send them to in bulk. They'll melt them down, and they will repurpose them. You know, they'll remold them and give them out to kids at fishing tournaments and stuff like that. It's not a mass recycling. Big Bite is working on some of that now to try to figure out ways to do some mass recycling of soft plastics, because it is PVC plastic and it can be used for a lot of other things. This wire, the coating on that wire right there is PVC, and there are some potential uses that soft plastic lures could turn into that sort of thing.
It's not chartreuse, though.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't have glitter, and it doesn't smell like garlic.
You're right.
But so, and that's some of the challenges that they have in recycling this stuff. It's not as easy, but it's really a litter problem that people need to address. They need to be conscientious. You know, anybody gets in my boat, if I see them pitching something overside, I jump on them.
Whoa! What are you doing?
I get, you know, it's not a good thing.
Let me pick your brain on this. Was Jean LaRue the first company to put salt in plastics?
They patented the process, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. And it started here in Oklahoma, didn't
actually,
it?
It started in Missouri.
Okay.
And then wound up in Oklahoma. And the company, as we know it now, bought the rights to that process of putting salt in the plastics. And then Jean LaRue then licensed that technology to a lot of other companies that you know, there's some baits you look at it and there's salt in the package, but it's not in the bait.
Right.
And then other ones, it's actually impregnated into the plastic, and that's what Jean LaRue, when they were still in Tulsa, that's part of what they did was license the rights to do that.
Was there actually a dude named Jean LaRue?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That goes way back. You know.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
All right. Not Vic Vreeland.
No, way before. No. Vic and his buddies bought the company and set it up. And
is he still mayor of Jinx?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think Vic may have retired.
All right. He was a funny guy.
He's a character.
He was really, really good.
Yeah.
Interesting. So all the other baits that had salt, not in the package, but inside the actual bait, that was actually a Jean LaRue thing of which they had to pay rights to. for how many years or whatever.
However many years those kind of patent things work. I don't know.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Several people want to know, including on the Bass Zone feedback, what about scent? Has there ever been studies? Obviously there has been, but the whole correlation between scent and does that truly attract the fish?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Keith Jones was the chief scientist at Berkeley for years. He and another guy at Berkeley came up with the power bait. And subsequent studies that they've done, Keith is retired now. There's some other people working at Pure Fishing that do that same sort of work. But bass's sense of smell is not what I would call a long-range sense. Their long-range senses are hearing and sight. So the sense of smell is something that really comes into play more when they're close to a prey item or a bait in this case. And so it's not something that's going to attract fish for yards and yards away unless there is a current and a flow that's coming to them, and they happen to be where the scent molecules off of whatever this bait is are drifting towards them. Then they can figure out there's something there, and they can start tracking it. If it's a lure that has a scent that's moving, they may be able to follow that scent a little ways, but it's not something that's going to attract fish from a long ways. But it does, the scent and then the taste, once they get it in their mouth, are things that give them positive feedback, and they say, okay, this is real, I'm not going to spit it out. They get a bad scent, something that they don't like, that that tends to be a negative, then bang, they'll spit those things out. But it's very definitely something that makes a difference, and I know those the guys that are smallmouth fishermen will tell you that scented baits make a difference. And when you think about somebody drop shotting, max scent power worm, the flatworms that were all the rage, it's not attracting those fish from the scent standpoint from 20 feet away. They're seeing it at that distance, typically clear water. But once they get in close, that's when the scent and the taste things really start to make a difference that trips their trigger and says, okay, eat it.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like these donuts?
Yeah. And I noticed
can't believe you did that.
He hadn't even opened the box yet. So
No. I can't smell them, so I can't even taste them, but they're here.
Yeah,
all
well,
right.
that's what I said. Take them to the teacher's lounge at school. They'll disappear.
Wow. All right. Well, we're going to take our final break, come back, take a couple more questions, wrap things up here with Gene Gilliland on a Tuesday. Everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Pro-inspired, pro-designed. Tested and proven by legends on the water. Dominating the tournament trail for over 50 years. Everything you need, one legendary brand. Strike King.
Hey guys, Major League Fishing Pro, Jacob Wheeler here with my new Signature Series line of rods with Duck It Fishing. We have my 7.2 cranking rod right here. Crankbaits can be very fickle, and having the right, having a lot of tip can be too much, and having not enough tip can, lose a lot of fish. So you really got to be careful. If there's one or two techniques that I'm really adamant about having the perfect action as a crankbait, especially like a square bill, a DT6, those medium running crankbaits in the springtime when those fish's mouth are pretty tough. That's when I'm really on top of having my actions just perfect.
The Little John family of crankbaits designed by top tour pro John Cruz have excelled at catching bass in any condition for years. They all feature a flat-sided design and paint jobs that are seldom seen in mass production bait. The Little John family also expands with new rattling versions of the Little John 50 and Little John 50 MD. Both of these baits are proven fish catchers that will now be available in rattling versions for stained and muddy water. They feature the same great action and diving depths as the original 50 and MD sizes.
The Ned rig. What rod should I be using with the Ned rig? My favorite is the Denali Lithium multi-spin rod. It's our 7'4" length, great Ned rig rod. It's got a great sensitive tip on it. It's long enough where I can make long casts, which you're usually fishing clear water with a Ned rig, and it's got enough backbone to get those fish in. So check it out, Denali Lithium Series 7'4" multi-spin.
All right, we are back with Gene Gilliland here on a Tuesday. By the way, tomorrow I'm flying solo. Matt will be in a heated competition on Table Rock Lake tomorrow. I think tomorrow's the first day. Could be the last day of practice. I don't know. I'm not sure. Anyway, he's at Table Rock, so I'll be flying solo. Going to have Brian Snowden on tomorrow via the Sunline hotline, and we'll see what he has to say about a life-changing step in what Brian Snowden's going to be doing and kind of getting out of the national tournament scene. So looking forward to that. All right, Gene. Now, we were talking in between the break. If there are people out there that do have questions, are you into the social media world? Do you have a Twitter account? Do you do the Instagram? Or can they reach out directly to you via email or any other process?
Yeah, the easiest thing for me to deal with is probably just through email, especially if it's a kind of a detailed question. Of course, the downside is that if I answer that for one person, it might be the answer that 10 people are looking for.
Yeah.
I've got a Facebook page, but I never post anything but like once a year. One of the places that a lot of people that I put stuff almost every day is our Bass Conservation Facebook group. It's BASS with the dots, Conservation. And it's a Facebook group, and you ask to join, and I say yes. And I post stuff up there almost every day about some issue somewhere. Mm-hmm. And it's a good place for people to make comments and, if they've got questions about things. The other thing that I would really encourage people to do, depending on where they are, because the answer you get for somebody, say, in South Carolina versus Oklahoma versus, Ohio, are going to be different. And it makes it kind of challenging to come up with one answer that would cover everybody's questions. Get to know your local biologists and your state fisheries people. Those are the folks that know your waters better than anybody, and I think those would be the ones to start with. But if people want to email me, I can't guarantee I can give you a quick response, or Facebook messaging. I'm on. You can do that too, but it just kind of depends on my time.
Yeah.
But my email address is just ggilliland@bassmaster.com. And it's on the website. If you can go to the conservation pages of bassmaster.com and dig around there, my email address is on there somewhere.
Yeah. All right. A couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap things up. One of the earlier comments was referencing the rant, a rare rant that Matt went on about releasing fish during very large tournaments in certain areas and all that and everything. Yeah. I know you have worked closely with a lot of organizations to do the right thing when it comes to releasing fish. Mm-hmm. What is the right thing to do, Gene?
Well, like we were talking about before with those tracking studies and stuff, they've shown that these fish, a lot of them do stay in the immediate area of a tournament release site, especially if, almost every lake, there's one ramp that tends to get all of the fishing pressure.
Retreads.
Yeah. And so a certain number of those fish are going to hang out in there because they found everything they need. There's food, there's cover, there's the all those conditions are right.
Yeah.
So they'll stay put. They don't have a reason to leave. Most of them are going to move out. Now, what a lot of organizations like Bass does and any number of groups that use live release boats or trailers, the idea is to try to spread those fish. It's not that we're going to take them home. We can't, when you've got a pontoon boat that's got 8,000 pounds of water in it, and it goes about 4 miles an hour when it's loaded, and if there's any kind of wave action, anybody that's been in a pontoon boat in rough water knows that, we can't take those fish very far, but we can get them away from the immediate release areas out into more open water. When they fall out of the bottom of that release boat, they can go 365 degrees. They can go swim any direction they want to and find a new place to live. Or if they're close enough and they've got their GPS system working right, a certain number of those fish can find their way back to where they came from. But we've always tried to encourage organizations to spread fish out, to get them away from some of those high traffic areas. And whether it's using a release boat or some organizations use trailers that they can take to other boat ramps and release fish at different places around the lake. And, in the grand scheme of things, it's not hurting the bass population. If there's fish that get caught over and over that are, those dumb ones, the
retreads,
the ABC fish already been caught, that are hanging out at a boat ramp area in a maybe it's a bay or a cove or something. If they get caught 2 or 3 times, there's certainly a chance that just having to go through that tournament experience 2 or 3 times may be enough to kill them. But in the bigger picture, that's a very small percentage of the total bass population, and it's not hurting the overall, numbers or sizes of fish in the lake. So it's a good thing to do if you can do it right. Operating release boats and trailers and stuff can be tricky. Making sure you don't overload them, that you've got good water quality, your oxygen levels are good. All of those sort of things have to be done right. You've got to have people that know what they're doing to make it work properly. Otherwise, you can have bad things happen, and you can kill a bunch of fish if you don't do it right. But in general, we try to move those fish away a little bit just to get them out of the immediate vicinity of the launch area and those high traffic spots.
All right, and as you mentioned earlier, some will stay there, some will go a mile, some will go, a little ways farther, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, we did a study out here at Lake Thunderbird outside of Norman, and tagged fish at the Wednesday night tournament. They have had a tournament every Wednesday, all spring and summer, and we tagged every single fish during 1 year. And over the course of the next 3 years, we looked at where those fish were recaptured when somebody caught those fish again. Mm-hmm. And about half of the fish stayed within about a mile of the boat ramp for 3 months. And then they started to spread out. Now, we had some fish. We had some fish that went 7 miles in 2 days. They swam a long way. But generally, within a year, all of those fish had pretty much dispersed from that area. Now, if you've got a situation where you've got tournaments coming back over and over and over to those same locations, you got the same kind of deal. It's kind of restocking that area, and gradually those fish will move out, and a new bunch gets turned loose, and gradually they'll move out.
Yeah.
But there's going to be that percentage that kind of stick around and are vulnerable to being caught again. They're not real smart because they've been caught once. Okay, so we had some fish that were caught 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
they're
hungry, man.
They just are stupid, but overall, it's not as I think I remember Matt's rant now that you mentioned that it's more of a psychological thing, maybe an ethical thing. If anglers don't feel it's right to fish for fish that have been released in release areas, that's kind of a personal preference. But from a biological standpoint, as far as the bass population is concerned, it's not a big problem.
Yeah. All right. We are going to wrap things up. I know the answer to one of these questions, and this question comes from Bo, our good friend Bo, who co-hosted the show as a guest. He's got a great question. What is your favorite fishery in Oklahoma, the Southeast, and the North? And I know one of the answers to these questions. Now, what's the Oklahoma one?
Does it have to be public water?
Yeah, I know about that one. No, you can't say that because that's not public.
Okay,
public water.
My favorite lake in Oklahoma actually is Lake Eufaula.
Really?
Sardis would be a close second. I like Eufaula just because it's so big and so different. There's so many different kinds of water there that you can fish.
Yeah.
Variety.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that. I wish it was not 2.5 hours away. And I'd probably fish there a lot more. Southeast, I don't know if Pickwick counts as Southeast.
Sure does.
That's I've got a good friend that has a house on Pickwick. In fact, I'm fishing Pickwick Saturday and Sunday this coming weekend, and I'm growing to where I really like to fish Pickwick. It's another one of those lakes that it's big. It's got a lot of variety. There's largemouth, smallmouth, that sort of thing. Northern lakes, gosh, I've gone to St. Clair for 13 years in a row now, so I've almost got to pick that one.
Well, that's the one I thought of.
Yeah, I really enjoy fishing St. Clair.
Smallmouth.
Yeah. Pre-spawn, jerkbait. That's our deal.
One last question. This one just popped up. Interesting from Nick. Any idea, ballpark, even a guess on how many times a bass is caught in its lifetime? Never?
Some. Yes, there actually have been some studies done on that. Of course, they're done in fairly small bodies of water because obviously in something, a 10,000 acre reservoir, you can't really do that. But in small bodies of water, they found that there are some fish that never get caught.
Yeah.
It's a small percentage, but there are, like I was talking about a minute ago, there are a handful that are just dumb as rocks, and they get caught. They just can't figure it out. They don't have much short-term memory or long-term memory, and they keep getting caught over and over. There are in those studies they found that in some cases well over half of the bass population can be caught.
Wow.
Now, again, that's in a fairly small body of water.
That's not on Lake Erie.
No. I mean, and so that's one of the problems with, social media does this to people. They see a study like that, and they automatically say, well, that must be going on in my lake.
Yeah.
And that may not be true. Just there's so many different factors that play into it. But quite a high percentage of fish, actually can be caught at one time or another.
Very cool, man. Can't thank you enough for sitting in for Matt, Gene, and I am hopeful that you will be a part of the show, however long we go, on December 20th. We can reminisce about that time that I stopped by your house when we lived in the same neighborhood.
Yeah,
that's quite the epic story there. But great stuff, and folks, take advantage of having somebody with the knowledge that Gene has to ask questions by shooting him an email. And I know Matt will continue to have you on. That I do know.
Yeah.
And continue to be a part of BTL. However, many times you want to come on. You're welcome anytime, man. You just live right down the street here. So, and thank you for the donuts.
You're welcome.
And as I mentioned earlier, I am so happy there was not a note attached to the donuts, okay? All right, everybody. Tomorrow I will be flying solo with Brian Snowden via the Sunline Hotline. And then Thursday, me and the man, day 4, with Mr. Frank Scalish. We will see what Frank has in store for day 4 this week and see how his turkey day went. See if there was a feast that took place at the Scalish house during Thanksgiving. You like cranberry sauce?
Yes.
All right. One of the few, man. I don't know why people don't like it, man. I love that stuff. I can't even taste it now, but I still love it. I just imagine what it tastes like.
Your memory.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Have a great Tuesday. That's it. We're out of here.